So hello and welcome to the channel and welcome to another Assetto Corsa Competizione video. As you can see, having a few issues with the Aston Martin, and what's the video going to be about? If I'm looking away, it's because I'm watching a replay on the screen here, but yeah, what's the video going to be about? Well, yesterday I got a message on my YouTube channel about beginner setups, where to start. I'll put that somewhere over here, from, I think it was Lawrence Jooste. Hopefully I've pronounced that properly. But yeah, he was asking where to start if you're a beginner with the game, if you're new to sim racing, if you're wanting to get into learning what to do with the setups, where to start really. And I thought about this for a little bit, and I replied to him saying, well, it's sort of a bit of a minefield really, because every car's different and every car wants something different within the setup, so it's very hard to offer the advice I think he was after. But I sat and thought about it for a little bit and I thought that there are a few key areas within the setups that I think everybody should be able to start adjusting really. They don't really need to know a huge amount about how the car works in order to get it more easier to drive. So I'm going to try and cover these during this video, and I'm not sure how long this video is going to be, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. But before we get into setting up anything on the car, a number of things that I would suggest. The first one being, make sure that your wheel firmware is the most up-to-date firmware. The developers are always going to be using the most up-to-date firmware because it's consistent then. They're not looking at other people using different lots of firmware, and they'll always be using the most up-to-date firmware for whatever wheel you're using. Which brings me on to another comment, just quickly I'll cover from someone else that I've been speaking to within the sim racing world, and just who's enjoying the game but has got a few gripes. Obviously, if you go to the Logitech website, if you go to the Fanatec website, there is none of the wheels currently suggest that they support Assetto Corsa Competizione on Xbox or PS4, and if you look deeper into that, none of them support Project Cars 3 either, and none of them support F1 2018 or 2019 and 2020, because they're relatively new games. So I definitely think that the developers are still working on Logitech wheels, Thrustmaster wheels, Fanatec wheels. They're still trying to get everything right. So for them people that are struggling with the wheels and they can't really find the right force feedback for them, I'm sure these things will get sorted over time. There's just so much to sort with this game, and obviously you've got the new console coming out where they'll be trying to get things sorted for that as well. So that's the first thing, get the firmware up to date. The second thing is driver ability and practicing. One of the things that I do like to do, and I used to do this quite a lot, especially when I was doing setups, and I'll just rerun that again, was going to the circuit just like a team would go to the circuit if they were testing, and you are the test driver. You need to run so many laps at the circuit. I would suggest, if you're really wanting to dive deep into this game, spend a week in one car only at one circuit. Do an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever amount of time you've got spare in order to learn the circuit. And I'll tell you, you will learn so much about the car and the circuit over that week. You'll go away each day and you'll be thinking about where you could be faster. You'll be thinking about things that you could adjust on the car that might make you feel quicker. And if you don't know loads about how to set the car up, that's alright, that's a big part of setting the car up, is understanding what things are going to do, but there's so many things that you can still adjust. And even just driving the circuit, you will get faster and faster every time you come back to the circuit. There'll be like a slight change to your line in a certain corner, which you'll notice is a little bit quicker. But really do spend time at a circuit in one particular car. Go away, think about how you've been driving, think about where you might be able to be faster. Watch other videos on YouTube, read reviews about things, read articles, listen to Ross Bentley's Speed Secrets. They are they're full of information that you can take in to be better as a driver. Another point I'll cover is brakes. I mean, I've got a decent set of pedals, the inverted V3s with the brake performance kit on, and I've also moved the damper across to the accelerator cable, which just allows me to modulate the throttle a little bit better. But braking is such an important part of sim racing, or real racing, but I'll use numerous different techniques when I'm braking, especially when you're very hard on the throttle initially. It's not like driving normally where you would be progressively braking. I'm braking as hard as I can brake, not like wham with the pedal. It's a solid press of the pedal, and as I'm coming off the pedal, it will be a smooth off the pedal as I come in with the accelerator. Or there might be times when I'm slowing down but the car's not rotating enough, and I'll slightly pump the pedal in order to get the car sort of using ABS that I'm creating myself, because I'm wanting to use the pedal to turn the car. So I might pump the pedal a little bit, or I might want the car to snap during a very sharp turning, so I might really bounce off the pedal. There's lots of different techniques that you can use with the brake pedal to manipulate how the car's going to react, and the same with the throttle. It's a lot to do with just practice really, and just learning how adjusting your brakes application can make a real difference to your lap times. So yeah, a lot of it comes just down to practicing and spending time at the circuit, learning the circuit inside out, learn every bump on the circuit, learn what curbs you can run and what curbs are going to disrupt the car. Obviously getting your brake markers, obviously getting sometimes 2 brake markers. Some of these boards, 50 metre and 100 metre yard boards, that are key braking boards really. Sometimes they get ruined in the race, and it might put you off where you're going to be braking into the next corner. So it's really important to some of those corners to bear in mind using a different marker, something that's not going to be disrupted. But anyway, let's get into looking at the setups. I think I've covered as much as I wanted to cover before we start looking at setups. I've chosen to use the Aston Martin V8. It's synonymously twitchy, let's say that. Just using optimum track conditions, using the preset, the clear preset at Zandvoort. So we'll return to garage. And another thing just to mention, obviously, I'll show you my force feedback at the moment. I'm using 85% gain, 150% on my wheel force feedback, and slightly reduced the dynamic damping. I was starting to get in a few areas down in the bottom right hand corner where you can see the clipping on the wheel. Just reduce that down a tiny bit just to stop any clipping effects. Just added 2% road effects. I don't know how much of an effect that's making. I was running 0, so I am sometimes messing around with this. But the main thing is making sure you've got the steering lock for the specific car you're using and you've got that set on your wheel as well. and obviously the steering scale is at 100 because we're wanting to be exact with how much steering's going into what steering I'm putting through the wheel. Another key thing that I'm using, obviously I'm shifting up and down with my bumpers. I've got my pit limiter on. I've got 4 buttons that I can really use on my wheel. As much as I've got other buttons, they're generally the same buttons that are used for shifting, so that sort of makes them a bit redundant. So I'm just using 4 buttons on my wheel at the moment. So A, the pit limiter, B is for flashing the lights, but I don't particularly think that works. And then obviously I've got a few other things here. D, left and right, to look left and right, and down to look behind me. I don't generally look behind me, but the other button I do use a lot is the view button to bring up the MFD HUD, because I do everything else with that. And then on here, very important, is to choose, depending on what car you're using, the traction controls. I want to jump between certain settings sometimes, and I'll maybe discuss that in another video. So yeah, let's come into looking at setups. So I always choose the aggressive preset, and you could choose the safe preset, but either way, the aggressive preset is generally going to be quicker, but it's going to be harder to drive. I've never tried using the safe preset, but I just always work from the aggressive preset. So if we load up the aggressive preset, we'll have a look at a few things that we can adjust before we even get started. So straight away, we can look at reducing the fuel. Obviously that's a no-brainer. Most of the short races are going to use around 40 litres of fuel to do a 20-minute race, or a 10-minute race would be 20 litres of fuel. So we'll leave it with 40 litres of fuel on board. And the brakes, generally if you're going to run a session that's shorter than 60 minutes, you would use brakes number 1. It just gets, I think generally it's just the thicker brake pad as we get higher. I think 1 and 4 are very similar. I'm sure I've read that somewhere, but for now I just use brake pads 1. Depending on how you use your brakes would determine how much power you want to put through your brakes. Generally I always have these at 100%, and I cater for how much pressure goes through my pedal using a setting on my wheel. To be honest, I can increase and lower it as to what I see fit. So that's always going to be something that's specific to yourself. Forget about this page, the dampers, and forget about the wheel rates for now, and the bump stops. These here, just forget about these for now. Forget about dampers. If you're new to setting up cars, the 2 things that you just want to forget about for now. And there's other things that we can look at. So in this video, I'm going to start with tyres. And we're going to also start with getting a feel for the car itself. So in order to do this, you're going to have to get involved. So we're going to just leave those as they are, and we're just going to pull out the pits and do about 3 laps. And in between that time, I'll discuss what's happening with the car. So the first lap's always going to be twitchy anyway, because you haven't got the tyres up to temperature. Always very twitchy at the rear end, this car. very definitely wants to snap on you at the rear end under braking. Always think there's very little downforce at the rear in this car. You can see it just wants to slide all the time, lots of oversteer. So as you can see, it's very happy at the rear end as well, under acceleration. Ooh, very twitchy just hitting that curb. Yeah, just getting a feel for the car here. So I'm not confident of going full throttle through there at all. Braking around the under yardboard. Very scared to get the power down. So very twitchy at the rear end under braking. That just wants to come round all the time. As soon as I'm trying to get the power down, as soon as I'm braking, the rear end's wanting to come round all the time. So it's wanting to oversteer on corner entry. Almost full throttle through there. Just need a tiny little lift. Whoa. Doesn't feel too bad. Just a little bit uncertain with it. Especially under braking. Really not happy under braking. Really loose rear end. So just sliding away. So what are we looking for during this session? We're looking at the brakes. Are the brakes getting up to temperature? Are they getting too hot? If anything, I think they're definitely in the green. I don't particularly think we need to be closing out. Oh, it's so close to getting through there. You see the rear brake disc just starting to cool down now. Might be an option to close that out a bit. Oh, so scary through there. Just tiptoeing through there. I don't think I would close the brakes out, to be honest. Oh, we've gone full throttle. Not an amazing lap at all, but yeah, just looking at the tyre delta down the bottom, even at 27.8, they still don't look too overinflated. 28, I'm sure we were looking at around the 27.3 mark to get the tyres in the best zone at the moment. Yeah, 27.5. So they could definitely do with coming down a touch, but they're not a million miles away. So let's return back to the garage. And obviously we can adjust the tyres. So let's just bring those down. And they did cool down a tiny bit, so let's bring them down five notches or so. So setting the tyre pressures is a bit of an easy one, really. So when I'm looking at the front, let's just look at tyres for now, and they're looking pretty good, to be honest. I've got to be honest. Quite unusual, really. You usually get so much more difference between the outer and the inside and the middle of the tyre, but it's not too bad at all. But yeah, looking at the tyres, usually at the rear I'd be looking at the outer and the inner tyre, probably about 4 degrees, between about 6 and 4 degrees temperature difference. And as you can see, we've got exactly the same temperature across the whole of the tyre at the rear. Slightly different on the right hand side of the car. And usually you can go between, say, 12 and 8 degrees difference at the front. So if we went to the front and we added maximum cambers, I don't think that would be out of the ordinary. And again at the rear, I think we could add a tiny bit more camber, to be honest. We're already losing the car a little bit through the corners on the rear end, and as you can see, the tyres are wearing very evenly across the back of the tyre, and usually, like I said, you're looking between 4 and 6 degrees at the rear. So that's one thing that we can look at. The other thing was possibly the brakes, and I think for this circuit, for the temperature that it's running, I don't think I would close out the brakes at all. But you can bear in mind that if the graphic on the screen, if you're getting a cooler rear brake, it's an option to close out the brake duct, just to get the brake warmer for the majority of the time. You want it to be at temperature when you're braking. It'll be more efficient braking. So that's something that you could look at. But I would always close the brake ducts quite early on in the setup, because they're going to make a difference on how the tyres react to temperature. So to get that done early on would be the best option. So one of the other things that we can look at, and it's best to look at this on the fly really whilst you're driving, is the brake bias. Now, when I'm looking at the brake bias, it's always going to be within the 60s and within the 50s, and we'll take a little run out. So I always bring up this MFD at the side, and you can adjust the brake balance whilst you're driving. So if we adjust the brake balance to, let's go all the way forward. That's as far forward as it goes. And just see the difference that it has on the handling. Obviously it's not going to affect acceleration. But hopefully it'll stop the car from twitching. Especially at the rear, especially through here. Much more stable, even on the first lap. Obviously not under acceleration. Now I'm not saying to go as far as I've gone with the brake balance, but I'm just showing you the difference that it's going to make. Oh, get these tyres warm. I think you could go flat through there, to be honest, with good car positioning. But look at the tyre graphic down the bottom now. Just look how warm the rear brakes are getting, and they're getting hardly any temperature through them because I've moved the brake balance so much towards the front of the car, and it's going to affect the tyre temperatures. See how the rear tyres aren't warming up anywhere near as quickly as the fronts now, because the brake discs aren't getting warm. I've not got that horrible snap of oversteer every time I come through there. Just got a bit of a weird glitch on my wheel at the moment, sometimes double shifting. Certainly more stable through the braking phases, but the car's not rotating either, which could cause you issues really. This car rotates so much anyway, it doesn't seem to be a massive issue. Just a tiny lift there to get it right. But you see the rear tyres, definitely cooler. Just focusing a little bit here. Just gone too deep with that. Lost all that time. But look at the tyre delta. Look how much it's saving the rear tyres. Just having changed the brake bias. The tyres aren't getting anywhere near as warm. Oh. So if you were going to use the brakes as they are now, obviously you would look at closing out the brake ducts because they're just not reaching the temperature. So let's just carry on and let's just move this brake bias a little bit more towards, because it was all the way down at something like 62. So let's try it at about 68. See if that warms the brakes up a little bit. If we're still getting a little twitch as we come over here, we might put it a bit further back. It still feels alright. Bit of better rotation through there. Oh. We've got some issues elsewhere, but looking at the braking, that's much better. So just play around with the brakes. So as you can see, it's still fairly cool, the rear brakes. Nice and warm now though. So not bad not having knocked 1.3 seconds off my lap time. I'm not looking at lap time, but just showing you what a difference that makes. Obviously, as I'm learning the circuit, we're getting quicker as well. So let's just return to the garage and look at the setup. Obviously the tyres again are getting a little bit hotter, so we can bring those down. Just bring that down 3 clicks. Click at the front. I like to run around 27.4, and we can bring that up at the rear a tiny bit, and that one's fine. So looking at the outer tyres, we haven't made very many changes. You're still getting a little bit of wear. So you've got 2 degrees difference on the right hand side of the car. So we could even add a tiny bit more rear camber at the moment. The front car we've got 4 degrees and we can't really get any higher than that. Although we could increase the caster angle, but let's just keep this really basic for this one. So just use the cambers so that you've got a difference of around 10 degrees at the front, 6, 10, 12, something like that, between the outer and the inner tyre, and at the rear about 4 degrees difference maximum really through the rear of the car. As you can see, we've got 2 degrees on the right hand side of the car, 1 degree at the back. So you're playing around with the cambers to get a similar sort of area. We could see that the rear brakes now, you could choose to close that out a tiny bit if you wanted to, especially on the long straights, but through the middle of the circuit the temperature wasn't getting crazy. It definitely wasn't going yellow at any point. The front discs and the rear disc wasn't really going outside its operating range, I don't think. If it was a really thick blue band on the brakes, I'd certainly be thinking of closing the brake ducts so that it gets a little bit warmer and retains a little bit more temperature whilst you're driving. So the next thing that we can look at, so if we look back at the electronics, we've got the ABS. Now the more ABS that you're using, it's like the pedal's going to be pumping, and the more the pedal's pumping, obviously as it's coming off, we're getting less braking power. So the more that the pedal's engaged and it's hitting, if you imagine the lower this is, that's just wham on the pedal and it's not brake, it's just braking solidly. So there's a possibility of locking the wheel. At 1, you're getting a very, I mean, I'm exaggerating here, it's like, and it's just getting faster and faster the more you do that with the brake. So you're getting less brake and you're getting more chance of being able to move and rotate the car whilst the ABS is in. Definitely towards the wet conditions you would want more because you're not wanting to lock up. So in these conditions, pretty dry conditions, you might choose to run a lower braking. Let's try 2 and see if I'm locking up the brakes at all. But you might find that you can stop the car far quicker, which might be a real bonus in some areas if you're under heavy braking. So this is something you need to play around with. It's not always a massive bonus regarding lap time. But it certainly can be in areas. You notice we get a little twitch there as we came through. Obviously it's just the outlet. Let's get the tyres warm first. And we'll address that throttle shortly. So there's probably 2 key areas that this is going to benefit. One of them being back there as we're stopping. You can see that's why I just changed that brake bias. There we go. So we had it at 68. So I think we could brake a little bit later now for that corner. Oh, just too eager on the power. Let's see if I can brake a little bit later into this corner. So look how much we've gained on that. 0.2. That's my mistake. But just look at the difference it makes. So try using the brake ABS to your advantage in certain areas. You'll get better braking, but you need to be more careful about how the car might lock up on the brakes. So one of the other things that we're getting issues with is accelerating off the corner. The car's just really wanting to oversteer a lot. So that's when we're looking at TC1 and TC2. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen another video I did regarding wet weather conditions, and I'll just try and increase these together for now. So let's try both of them at 4. So the higher the number, the more engine power is going to be cut, and the amount of time. Yeah, let's go back to these. So the top one, traction control, is going to determine when the power is going to be cut from the engine. So if you decide on corner exit you're going to put the throttle down fully, and the engine's just going to say no. So let's just for example, we'll have this corner, so you're entering into this corner and you're going to go around here. So if you decide at this point here that you're going to accelerate out of the corner, and you put the throttle fully down, the engine might here, let's say at 8, you put the throttle down here, the engine might say no, we've not got enough grip at all, and it's just going to wait until the car's straighter and there's more torque through the rear wheels to allow you to put the throttle down. If you go all the way down to here and you put the throttle down here as you're entering the corner, it's just going to give you 100% of the power straight away, and it's just going to probably spin the car out. So at 1, it's going to still give you quite a bit of power straight away. So it's going to determine when it's going to allow the traction control to give the power. Traction control 2 determines how much of the power that's available from the engine it's willing to give you. So right at the top, it'll give you very little power from the engine when you want that power. Whenever the traction control's enabled, or engaged. If you go all the way back to 0, it'll give you 100% of the power from the engine when it's available to give you that power. So this is determining when, and this is determining how much. And I'd use them together at the start. So let's see what a difference that makes on corner exit now. Don't be afraid to use the traction control to your advantage, really. So if I go full throttle here, it's still a little bit slidey. Let's get the tyres warm first. Carried a lot of speed from there. So you can hear it even engaging. Oops. And down at the bottom, wherever it's in yellow, you can see that it's engaging. So it's not wanting to step out at all. Tiny bit there. Much more confident to get back on the power. Tiny bit still there. We've knocked another half a second off just from the traction control. Oh, my bad. But yeah, you can see the difference that it's making. But you might think, oh, I can handle more power. So let's just go straight out and adjust this. You can adjust this on the fly using these at the side. So you might think, oh, I could handle more power on corner exit, which is a good thing really, because whenever you're cutting power, you're stopping the acceleration process. So you might think, I'll go down to 3. Or you might think you could go down, leave it on 4, but you could handle a little bit more power, so you might just go with 3 on TC2. Just conscious how long this video is already. Bit deep. So we're still getting the tyres warm, so that's still handleable, I think. Oh. Yeah, that's my bad. But you could see the difference. It was up a couple of seconds, or a couple of tenths, should I say. But yeah, just play around with the traction control. I'd probably suggest using both of them at the same time. But I'd also suggest if you reach a point where it feels very stable on corner exit and it's not wheel spinning at all, and you can get the throttle pedal fully down, you're probably using too much traction control. You're wanting a tiny bit to be able to really sort of use the throttle pedal to find the limit. You don't really want the car, you just go full throttle with the pedal and the car's doing all of the limitation of wheel spin. You really want to be controlling that to be able to get quicker and to use the throttle in a way that you can help rotate the car a little bit. So try to sort of go to a level where it's very stable on corner exit and then sort of work backwards from there. And if you wanted to work in smaller steps, as in, say if you've reached a level and it's very safe, I'd probably start working down on TC2 just to add more power to the rear wheels on corner exit, and see if you can handle that and you can modulate the acceleration coming off the corner. Get it to a point where you're in control of that and not the electronics in the car. So where do we go from there then? So I think we were happy on TC2. TC4, and TC3. And the next thing that I would probably look at is, if you are struggling with oversteer, is the preload differential. Now, the higher the preload, the more the wheels are going to lock when they rotate together. So it's going to reduce the car through slow speed corners. There's a PDF that I'll add in the video in the description regarding the preload, how it works. But the higher the preload, just in simple terms, the more the car tends to oversteer on corner exit. And the lower it is, the less oversteer that you'll usually get on corner exit. Most of the GT3 cars will run around 40 Newton meters, so I'd probably say around 200, somewhere in that region. But I don't think you would go far wrong on 90 for most of the cars. But some cars you might want more rotation at slower speeds. In slower corners you want the car to rotate more, and you want the car to have less oversteer on corner exit. So again, that's something that you need to play around with. There aren't really many corners on this circuit where I think it could do with more acceleration on corner exit, and the rotation works nicely on where it was set. And then we come to the aero. Obviously we're using quite a bit of rear wing already, and the car's set very high ride height wise. If we start to lower the ride height, let's just, for example, if you think, let's just lower it, it's going to have an effect by you've literally just lowered the car at the rear end like that. So it's not going to want to rotate anywhere near as much as it was doing. I'll just try and illustrate the difference. So it's nowhere near as pointy as it was, and you can hear it now hitting at the rear as well. I didn't think it was hitting through there. So I'm getting lots more understeer. Lots more, I'm having to put loads more effort into the wheel. So I just have to restart the video capture. Yeah. So yeah, lots more understeer from the car. I don't think we'll get through this last corner anywhere near flat out. You can see it's just wanting to understeer. But if you've got a car that's oversteering a lot, that'll certainly give you an idea on how you can stop it oversteering. Not the best exit. So for me it's just not rotating enough. Just doesn't want to go through that corner at all. Just too much understeer. So using the ride height will certainly change how the car, the characteristics of the car regards understeer and oversteer. So let's just try. It was nice to reduce it a tiny bit, but that was just too much. Does sound nice, the Aston Martin. That's better. Still a little bit tentative. Get them warm. I still think it was better how it was, to be honest. Just more rotation through the corner, especially on that last corner. So again, if the car's struggling, if you felt like it was oversteering too much, or you were losing the rear end through high-speed corners, you would want to start looking at the rear wing. But it doesn't have a massive effect, the rear wing. If we lower the rear wing, you can see the difference that it's having on the front aero variation. And I think you could probably get away with running a tiny bit less rear wing, because of a lot of the high-speed corners. Well, let's just have a little look. Just dropping that rear wing a tiny bit. You don't want to drop it too much because it's a little bit skittish at the rear anyway. But let's just see if it helps us at all. This is probably the hardest corner really with regards to rear wing. This high speed section. And again here. Still feels quite good though. very sideways through there. I don't think I'd get rid of that much rear wing. Definitely playing a part. Much more twitchy. Yeah, I think you're better off with more rear wing in that case. So I'd probably go back to 8 and probably leave that where it was, to be honest. But yeah, they're the 8 different things, I think. Tyres, cambers, brakes, brake ducts, mess with the ABS. Sorry, just getting lots of messages through. The traction control, and probably in fact the last thing to cover would be the anti-roll bars. So yeah, if the car's oversteering, again, I've got another PDF regarding that. The last thing that you could adjust is that I'd probably just add a tiny bit of anti-roll bar to try and get rid of some of that oversteer. This is a tricky corner, that one. It's just a tiny bit of oversteer that's yeah, the traction control is kicking in. Let's see how this fares. Still a little bit of oversteer through there. And through there. Gonna be nip and tuck. Oh. Scruffy. Yeah, I think there's probably a low 138 or 37 there, but yeah, it's not about the lap time. But yeah, reading from my list then, so do the tyres, get the tyre pressures to around 27.3 once you've run a couple of laps. Obviously look at the cambers, 10 degrees difference at the front, about 4 degrees difference at the rear. If it's like with the Aston Martin here, where it's very hard to get such a difference between the tyres, especially around this circuit. As you can see, you've got 3 degrees difference at the front and just 2 degrees difference at the rear, and 1 on that side, so it's quite hard to get that, but I'd try and aim around that sort of number. The brake bias, obviously change that if you're getting oversteer on corner entry or through some of the high-speed corners. Obviously bring the brake bias more towards the front, and then test the ABS difference. If you're able to run less ABS, you'll get better braking performance, so you could adjust that. The traction control for corner exit, try and use it to a level, try and increase them together, and then once you've reached a level where you're putting your foot down on corner exit and you're getting no oversteer at all, try coming down on TC2 to a level where you get a tiny bit of a kick on corner exit, and then you can adjust that with the throttle really. And then you've got the anti-roll bars to try and reduce any oversteer or understeer. Like I said, there's a PDF document in the description. And then you've got high speed oversteer, where you're losing the rear end around a lot of the higher speed corners. You might choose to either adjust the ride height or the rear wing. Both of them are going to have an effect on oversteer or understeer. If you've got the use of a front splitter as well, you could adjust that. And then the power ramp, again, there's another PDF document regarding the power ramp, but those would be 9 different things that I would look at from a beginner's sort of perspective. Forget about the wheel rates and all this stuff, forget about the dampers as well, and don't worry too much about caster or toe angles. Just forget about those for now. Use the other tools. As you can see, there's definitely lap time to be found in adjusting all those things, and it's about getting the car to a level that's makes you more comfortable driving it, and you can drive it more at the limit. The easier the car is to drive for you as a driver, the more consistent you can be. And like we've all seen before, you could set a blistering single lap, but if you can't hit lap after lap of a time that you're comfortable with, you're going to lose races. It's about accumulative time over a circuit, not just one lap. So try and be consistent with your lap times, and that is generally comes down to having a predictable car that's drivable. But you don't want to be too predictable, or you're going to be slow. So it's finding something that you can manage, and it's not a massive handful. Whereas I'd say the aggressive setup in the Aston is definitely a handful, and with just a few small adjustments you can make it very handleable. So I hope this has been useful. The setup as it is, if you wanted to use it, You can pause it at any point there. But yeah, I think that would comfortably set a 138, 137 if you're being consistent. So yeah, I hope you found that useful, Lawrence, and anybody else. If you enjoyed the video, please do like and subscribe, share the video, and definitely hit that thumbs up button if you've enjoyed the video. And until next time, ciao for now.